Module 4, Lesson 1, Semantic Development, Learning Words and Word Meanings. This module is about semantic development. This is about how children learn words and learn what words mean. A word is a sound symbol that represents something in the world. Words are usually abstract in that they don't have a physical connection to that thing in the world, except for a few words that actually mimic sounds, like woof. Words are arbitrary and determined by the social group. One social group can decide that the sound dog represents our four-legged friend, while another social group can say the sound chien is the word for that thing, and another group says seg. These are all arbitrary. The social group decided that the sound means that thing. Some other vocabulary that you need to know for this lesson is the term referent. The referent is the thing in the world that the word refers to. It can be a thing, as in a noun, like dog, or a word can refer to an action, like jumping. A word can refer to a quality, like an adjective, like blue. The referent is the thing, action, or quality out there in the world. Meanings, on the other hand, are cognitive constructs. Meaning resides in our brain. We have a meaning for a word. It means we know or understand or think something about the word. And so, meaning for words are intricately tied to our conceptual knowledge. When we say a word, we get some mental image. If I say bird, some image of a bird will come to your mind. You could describe it from your mental image. These mental images are made up of interconnected concepts. The web of concepts generated by one word leads us to other related words. These are words that can describe other words. So for my example of a bird, words like feather, beak, claw or talon, fly, sing, chirp, egg, etc., might all be connected to the concept of bird. A word is usually tied to the prototypical example of the referent. Not all birds are equally bird-like. When I first said bird, you were most likely calling to mind a small songbird, like a robin or a sparrow. You would be less likely to think of a penguin right away when I said bird. That's because a penguin is a less prototypical example of a bird. It shares fewer features with the larger group of birds. It does not fly or sing or sit in trees, but it does lay eggs. So how prototypical the example of a thing that we are referring to with a particular word will be based on how many features it shares with other things that can be labeled with that word. This is not just the case of nouns, but all concrete words. Even the word blue has you call to mind a prototypical kind of blue, and not a variant like robin's egg blue or indigo blue. You're more likely to think of cobalt or royal blue. If you're not sure what those colors look like, look up those words for those colors and see which one was the blue that came to your mind first. So now that you know a bit about what a word is and how it's related to our concepts, we'll turn to how children learn words. There are some principles that seem to predict what kinds of words children learn and how they may learn them. The first is the whole object bias. Children tend to learn the names for objects before they learn the names for the parts of those objects, or adjectives that describe the objects. Take, for example, a rabbit. If a child sees a rabbit, and I say the word rabbit, the child will assume the word is a name for the whole object. The child will not think that it's the word for ears, or fur, or brown, if that's the color of the rabbit, or hop, the action. The child makes the assumption that the words we use most often label objects. Next is the principle of mutual exclusivity. The mutually exclusivity principle says that each object has one label. Dog is a dog and not a cat. This usually is straightforward to apply, except when we are learning about categories and subcategories. Dog can be dog, and dog can be poodle. But children in the early word learning stages try to stick to one name for things. This leads to the third principle, the principle of contrast. Every word has a unique meaning. If it's a different word, then it's a different meaning. So when a child hears a new word, they can assume the new word is connected to a new thing, or a thing that they don't already have a word for. You saw these principles in action in Module 1 with the video on Chaser the dog. When he heard the new word, Darwin, that he hadn't known already, he assumed the word was a label for a new object. Children do this too. Children can apply these principles and learn new words very quickly. Sometimes after only hearing the word once. Susan Carey called this phenomenon fast mapping. She found that children could very quickly make a connection between a new word and its meaning, just like Chaser. Watch the video on the next slide. The experimenter introduces a word. He uses the word and he looks at an object inside a container. Even though the child never sees the object that the experimenter is labeling, because the container is not see-through, the child can figure out that the word the experimenter is using labels the correct object.
There's a modi. There's the modi. Look, there's a modi. Trista, there's the modi.
The modi.
The modi, right. Tristan,
The modi.
can you show me the modi? Where's the modi? Show me the modi. Can you hand me the modi?
Word learning follows these principles and is facilitated by fast mapping, and this develops in a continuous fashion from about 12 months of age until later adulthood. Dale and his colleagues measure the growth of children's word learning in the first few years by giving parents a checklist of words to fill out each month to report what words the child was using. They find that word learning is a relatively steady process from about 12 months onward. Children are adding about 30 words per month, or around 1 word per day, to their vocabulary. Others have reported that word learning comes at a slower rate between 12 and 18 months, and then increases more rapidly after 18 months. But Dale et al.'s research does not support this idea. Many children will learn words at a steady rate. When we examine the types of words that children learn in their vocabulary, it seems like there is a bias for learning nouns, the words for names of things. This makes sense when you think about the whole object bias that we said earlier influences how children learn words. However, it's also not surprising that children's early vocabulary contains more nouns than other types of words, because, at least in English, there are more nouns than there are other types of words. English is made up of 75% nouns. There are a couple of other words that you need to know and understand related to word learning. In children's early word learning, there are overextensions of words and underextensions. An overextension is when a young child, usually before the age of 2, overuses a word as if it is a category word. For example, a child might call someone dad if they're a man. The child overextends the use of a very specific word, dad, your male parent, to mean all male adults. Another example might be if the child calls a horse dog. The child overextends the specific type of animal label, dog, to label all four-legged creatures. Underextensions are the opposite. In this case, the child refuses to use a word for a whole category, but only wants to use the word for a specific instance. So, for example, the child has a stuffed bear that he calls bear. Then, Mom shows him a picture of a bear in a book and says bear. But the child says no and refuses to label the picture in the book with the same label that he has for a specific object, bear. By about 27 months, children rarely do this type of over or underextension. By this point, they start to understand the difference between category words and more specific words, and can learn them appropriately or understand them when they are explained. We gain a lot of knowledge about children's semantic development by studying children's vocabulary. These 3 tools are described on the next 3 slides. There are 3 different ways that we can study and measure children's vocabulary development. The MacArthur-Bates Communicative Development Index, which I have spoken to you before in a previous lesson, is a checklist for parents to check off all the possible words a young child might use. It lists words in categories to help parents think of all the different types of words their child uses. This is really effective for early word learning. There are just over 600 words on the list. Once children get to be over about 2.5 years old, they are using too many words to keep track of on a checklist like this. Then we begin to use other types of measurement tools. The Expressive One-Word Picture Vocabulary Test is a booklet full of pictures like this one. This is called an expressive test because the person doing the test has to express the word out loud. They have to know the word, recall it from memory, and be able to say it out loud. That is what we call expressive language. So the child is asked to use one word to describe each thing, action, or adjective depicted in the picture. So in this case, I say, "What is she doing?" And the child answers, "Singing." This type of test is a standardized test. So the average number of questions each child gets correct is compared to the average number known by children of the same age. 30-month-old children are compared to other 30-month-old children. 9-year-old children are compared to other 9-year-old children, etc. This test considers children compared to what is considered normal for their age group. This test even is used for adults up to 90 years old. It can tell the tester if the child or adult can express more words than average, less words than average, or the same. The Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test is very similar to the expressive one-word vocabulary test, except that it measures what the child understands about the language they hear and not what they can express. We call this receptive language. It's about the messages the child is receiving from language. In this test, the child is shown a series of pages with 4 pictures each, like this one. For each page, the tester says a word, and the child has to point to the correct picture to respond. So on this page, I would say, "Which one is sleeping?" And the child has to point. Like the previous test, the number of correct answers is compared to what is considered normal for the age of the child or adult. This does not really tell you anything about why the child might be at, above, or below their age mates. Since there are so many factors that can affect language development, standardized tests like this one are just a tool that we use to figure out how children are developing in comparison to their age mates. However, each child is an individual, and individual differences can often be more important than considering what is normal. I personally have used another method to measure children's semantic development. I did a study of word knowledge by interviewing children and asking them questions about a list of words. I sampled a select of random words from the dictionary. My sample was about 1 out of every 1,000 words in the dictionary. I ordered the words from simplest to most difficult and started with the simple words and continued asking questions until it was clear that the child did not know any more of the words on my list. Then I multiplied the number of words the child knew to get the total number that they would know if I had tested them on all the words in the dictionary and not just every 1,000th word. I asked them 3 types of questions for each word. The first was a definition question. What does the word closet mean? Then, if the child could not explain the word, I asked them to use it in a sentence. Can you use the word closet in a sentence to show that you know what it means? Finally, if the child could still not show that they knew what the word meant, I asked them an oral 4-choice multiple choice question. The child had to say yes or no to each of the possible answers. For example, does the word closet mean a room in your house where you go to make meals? No. Does closet mean a small room in your house where you usually keep clothes or coats on hangers? Yes. Here are some examples of definitions from a 7-year-old in grade 2. Soaking. It's when you're wet. My boots and clothes are soaking. Live born. You're alive and you're born. Like you're alive and you're not dead. You're born and you're not in your mom's stomach. That is a good 7-year-old kind of explanation for what it means to be live born. Here are some examples of a 10-year-old in grade 5. The word soaking again. It's really wet and dripping. Her clothes were soaking after she fell in the pool. What does the word milk cow mean? A cow that gives you milk. An animal that's black and white, and a white drink. Here are some examples of a 13-year-old in grade 8. Soaking. Soaking can mean that you're immersing something in a liquid of some sort until it's drenched. A very detailed answer. Milk cow, a fairly tall animal about the height of a horse, only much broader, produces milk. Its offspring are called calves. It's slaughtered and turned into beef. I think that's about all I can come up with. You said it produces milk. What's milk? Milk is a white substance that we find nutritious and tasty to drink. Here are some examples of a 16-year-old in grade 11. Soaking, that it's covered in water all the way so it's soaking wet. If it's like a piece of fabric or something, it's wet all the way through. Milk cow is a cow that produces milk. What does cow mean? Cow is one of those bovine creatures that they have on farms. It's black and white. Milk, it's stuff that you buy at the grocery store, which you drink, and it's full of calcium and good nutrition, and it's white. You can see from reading these 4 different grade level examples that children get more sophisticated in the way that they answer a definition type question. They use more varied vocabulary, and they explain with more specific examples. Not only do they show that they know more words, but the way that they express the knowledge is also developing. Looking at children's vocabulary development gives you a good picture of their conceptual development. Overall, the general results of my study showed that vocabulary at the age of 7 is about 18,000 words. By the time they're 16, it's over 80,000 words. If we consider how many days there are in the 9 years between the age of 7 and 16, we can figure out how many words per day the average child is learning. In those 3,285 days, in those 9 years, the child learns about 65,000 words, or nearly 20 new words per day. Think back to what we said about toddlers between the age of 12 months and 30 months. Those children were learning 1 new word per day, and that seemed like a lot. But word learning doesn't stop, and it gets faster and more richer. We're learning at least 20 new words each day in the elementary school years. The next lesson will focus on the environment. How do we learn so many new words?